Hello and welcome to Apolla's Odyssey. We are here at the Manson Caves. Me and my friend Brad Olsen, we did an interview last night for Third Face of Moon, and we just drove down here to check it out because he hasn't seen it before. I actually went here a couple months ago, and it's really interesting what's going on right now because it kind of relates to what happened back then. There's a lot to do with Manson and the race wars and the Black Lives Matter movement, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But where I'm at right now is this is where the official Time magazine photo was taken, where when they found them, all the girls were kind of hidden under here. Or actually, that was a photo that was taken earlier and sent to Time magazine when everything came out eventually. There's some other caves up here that the underage girls were always hidden in whenever they thought the cops were coming. They called them the baby caves. I haven't found those yet. And the ranch is actually up here. There's a little field up here. And Spahn Ranch, that's where they all lived and where the cult kind of hung out. It was like their hangout spot where they all lived. But there isn't anything left. It's just a field. So it's kind of interesting, but definitely interesting to see the caves here. And since the last time I was here, someone left this mug shot of Charles Manson, so that's a little interesting. And also, it was just Halloween, and apparently someone sacrificed a pumpkin to Charles Manson.
Hi, my name is Brad Olsen, and I'm here with Apolla Asteria. She took me here after I saw on her Facebook page that she found the location of Spahn Ranch. This is where the Manson family was hiding out and living during the Tate LaBianca murders in 1969. The really horrific, bloody murders that wrote the lyrics to some of the Beatles songs and other terrible things in human blood at both of the murder sites in the summer of '69. It's interesting that up here is a picture of Charles Manson, but this is dated April 22nd, '68. So this must have been when he was just a two-bit crook, got busted for some petty crime. But up above us in the field is the location of the Spahn Ranch. There's really nothing left of it, but you can find it on Google Maps. We did, and it is a historic site, obviously with a very dubious past. And here we are at the cave. There was a Time magazine photo of the Manson family hiding out under here, and some other caves where they would keep underage girls and stuff. So they must have had a really good lay of the land here that they could run and hide. Charles Manson was a paranoid, low-level criminal, but he was an expert at mind control. I read the book called Helter Skelter, written by Vincent Bergliosi, who is the prosecutor of the Manson family. And he wrote a very well-written and thick book of the account of how Charles Manson drove his family to do these horrific murders. Charles Manson himself never went to either the Tate or LaBianca murder scenes, but he sent members of his family to go and do the killings. And the way he would do it, as described in the book Helter Skelter, he would insist that nobody smoked pot or did any drugs or drinking in the daytime. And he would send them out to go do petty crimes, make money for the family. Sometimes the girls were prostitutes, or they would bring back runaway girls who would then live and become part of the family. And the way he would indoctrinate them is he would get them into one of the buildings, which is a movie set, a Western town movie set here on the Spahn Ranch in LA, after dark. And they would play Beatles albums, primarily the White Album, where the song Helter Skelter comes from. And that was also scrawled in blood at the home where Sharon Tate was murdered. And what he would do is at night, then he would give them LSD, or they would smoke marijuana or start drinking. So they would be in an altered state of mind. And he would start going into this narrative about how there were these coming race riots and how the Manson family was going to be one of the few groups of white people that was going to survive. So he got everybody into this heightened state of paranoia, especially under the influence. And then they would play the Beatles album and find all kind of cryptic meaning in the Beatles albums. Most specifically, the song Helter Skelter, which is kind of a dark sounding song. But one of the girls in the group was named Sadie, and there's a song called Sexy Sadie. And they have a verse in that song that they would have a seance in the dark. So Charles Manson would use the lyrics from the Beatles album and twist it into his own narrative of coming strife in America. After the Tate LaBianca murders, the Manson family left this location and they went out to Death Valley. And in Death Valley, it's a very unusual location because there's also caves and sometimes mine shafts and other ways to get into the underworld of Death Valley. And this is where the Manson family was going to anticipate that they would hide out during the coming race wars. It was only because a member of the Manson family stole a backhoe from a neighboring ranch and got caught, brought in for questioning, and he blurted out something that had to do with the Tate LaBianca murders. And then they went and collected everybody from the compound in Death Valley and separated them and started interrogating them and found that here we have the members of this Manson family that were responsible for these horrific murders. And that's how the story got, the crime got solved. But while they were here in Los Angeles, they were using the Spahn Ranch as a base camp. Old Man Spahn, he was the owner of the ranch, and one of the young ladies would have sex with him, perhaps multiple ones would. And a lot of the story of the Spahn Ranch is told in the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where the Brad Pitt character comes out here to go talk to Old Man Spahn and then sees a bunch of the young ladies and a guy named Tex who was part of the murders and had to leave after checking in on Old Man Spahn. So a lot of that was based on the truth. If you want to see a reproduction of what the Spahn Ranch looked like, take a look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Quentin Tarantino movie just came out a couple years ago. I don't recall this cave being in the movie. I'd have to watch it again now that I know about it to see it. But to be here is a part of history, albeit a very dark bit of Americana history, but nonetheless a very interesting location where you could obviously see that they would have plenty of place to hide if the police showed up, or how they could rendezvous here at night and have these very dark seances when they would play the Beatles records backwards. Most especially Revolution Number 9, the last song on the White Album. And it has backward tracks on the record when you play it. So it's almost tempting Charles Manson to turn that record around, like so many rock songs of the 60s and early 70s have these cryptic messages embedded in there. But the White Album, especially this track, Revolution Number 9, does it unabashedly, that you hear the backward sounding track and it tempts you to play it backwards. So this would have given Charles Manson a lot of ammunition to say, look, the Beatles themselves are communicating with us and telling us that this race riot called helter-skelter is upon us. And unless we do something about it, and in his twisted mind, the way to get attention for it was to do these horrific murders here in Los Angeles County to bring light to the coming strife that was going to hit America. And isn't it interesting that right now in the year 2020, we have the Black Lives Matter movement and so much division between the races? Charles Manson passed away a couple years ago while serving a life sentence. And I think he would have been delighted to know that some of his prophecy may have come true right here at the Spahn Ranch out near Simi Valley in Los Angeles.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about the women who were a part of the Manson family, because to me it was very interesting to think about what kind of women or what kind of girls, what attracted them to being in this cult and what brought them here. And after I came here a couple years or earlier in the year, a couple months ago, I decided I wanted to watch as many documentaries as possible on the women especially. And there's a lots out there on YouTube, just online, of different TV shows like around the 80s and till now, of interviews with these women all the way up until present day actually. And I think the three main girls that were in it that did the killings are actually in prison still. One of them I think was released on good behavior, but one of them, she said that she was actually trying to that she had come to Jesus and she'd understand what she had done, and is trying to get released but still isn't being allowed to be released. But what is interesting is how brainwashed these women became and what he did to brainwash them. You know, a lot of people talk about how he was a part of an MK Ultra program. Now, I don't know if he was a part of the CIA like a lot of people say, because obviously during this time, there was a lot of MK Ultra programming going on in Laurel Canyon, which is actually near where I live right now. And it was weird because a lot of these rock stars in the 60s, they lived in Laurel Canyon and they were all from military families and they all were a part of this MK Ultra programming. Now, I don't know if Charles Manson was a CIA operative. A lot of people have discussed different sides on that, but it was kind of weird, his backstory of how he came here from San Francisco. He sort of came out of nowhere and started getting this cult together. So I don't know, I feel like he must have had some connections, because I know Jim Morrison did come by. I think some members of the Beatles might have come by at one point. They had a lot of different people coming through. And even Sharon Tate, it's interesting for me to think that she was with Roman Polanski and she was pregnant with his baby when she was killed. And Roman Polanski was actually out of town during that time. And Roman Polanski, obviously, he's had some pedophilia charges and he's been involved in a lot of weird stuff. So I'm almost wondering if maybe he was involved with the Manson family and maybe there could be a CIA connection there. I don't know. But possibly my understanding is, like, I think maybe he actually had something against Sharon Tate at the time. They were in some sort of argument and he left town and told them to go in and kill her. I mean, who knows? But I mean, to me, it seems very likely, especially because he was out of town at the time of the murder. So getting back to the women in the cult, so there's a lot of documentaries out there on the kind of women that he would bring in. A lot of times they were runaways. A lot of times they didn't have a father figure in their family, so they were very attracted to him because he would come in and be almost like a father figure to them. And he made them feel like they were in a family because they lived, all these women, if you look at all of them and all their lives, they all were in like families that, you know, there wasn't a father figure around, or the father figure was abusive, or it just wasn't a very good family situation. So most of these girls were runaways at like 16, 17. And this is back in the 60s, you know, they wanted to experiment with drugs and have fun, so he found them and brought them into this. So I think that's a very interesting aspect on that, and definitely something that a lot of young women should look at today, because there's still a lot of people around that have cults, and it's usually women with these kinds of mindsets that are brought into them. So I think that's an interesting aspect on the situation. And it's definitely interesting to go back and look at these interviews with these different women. One of them was saying, one of the girl's parents, I can't remember which one, it was one of the main three, her mother was saying that when she was brought into the jail, she was saying that there was nubs on her back where her wings were coming out. And she was like, I'm an angel, like, where my wings are here, like, please, like, don't take off, or something about her shirt, like, she didn't want her shirt taken off because her wings were there, and, like, she had nubs for her wings that would be poking out. And it's like, how are these women this brainwashed? I think it had to do with the acid and being suggestive. They were already kind of chosen, like, he knew what kind of women to bring in that would be suggestive women that needed a father figure type, and that whose family wouldn't really care about them missing or would know that they were just a runaway. So I think that's just a very interesting aspect of the story.
So here we are at St. Susanna Pass. It's also a state park, a very old historic trail where the wagon trains would go over to get to the Simi Valley from the San Fernando Valley behind. And this is also the location of the Spahn Ranch, where the Manson family lived during the infamous Tate LaBianca murders in August 1969. And that meadow you see behind is the actual location of an Old West movie set that was called the Spahn Ranch, owned by a man named Spahn. He was still alive, and they coaxed him into letting the family stay there. All through this valley are caves and a dry riverbed and all sorts of hiding places that the Manson family could evacuate to. There's also reports of a shooting that took place here by someone in the Manson family up in one of these hills. But we went down to the field here to look and see if we could find any remnants of the Old West movie set called the Spahn Ranch, and really nothing stood out as being an artifact from that time. I guess you kind of could see that souvenir hunters or the state park really wouldn't want people coming here and glamorizing Charles Manson for those murders. But interestingly, this land over on that side of the gorge where the Spahn Ranch is located is owned by this church, which has been sitting vacant for quite a while, even before COVID. And you can see there's a cross on the hill over there. It's just kind of behind the tree, but I think they own all this land here. And we didn't see any signs that said no trespassing to go down to the Spahn Ranch. But the fact that you can find it on Google Maps and come to this location and hike around is kind of interesting, that they do recognize it as a sort of historic site. Well, after the Manson family was arrested in Death Valley, some of them then being charged with the murders of the wealthy supermarket magnate family LaBianca, which was the murder of a couple a few days before Sharon Tate and the people she was with at a party. Those individuals responsible for those killings were put on trial, as well as Charles Manson. And the state of California had just done away with the death penalty, so they were all given life in prison. But several members of the Manson family that didn't have anything to do with the murders were let go. They remained free. But the cult around the Manson family lived on. In fact, two of the women who were in the Manson family made attempts on President's life. And Squeaky Fromm, being the most infamous, actually got a couple shots off at Gerald Ford and almost hit him. She, of course, was arrested, as was the other, and anyone else implicated in attempted murder of a president, and they're still in jail. Although some of them have said they found Jesus and are hoping someday to get parole. But I think the Manson family crimes are just too infamous that there would be too much of a outcry for if they became released into the public, that they will probably remain in prison till the day they die. Just like Charles Manson, who used to perform his 12 o'clock a meeting seance in a table in the dark, where voices out of nowhere put on especially for the children of a lark, which are lyrics from Cry Baby Cry in the White Album. And I remember those lines being recited at the trial and reprinted in the book Helter Skelter by Vincent Bergliosi, that he would use those lyrics from the White Album to help program and mind control the Manson family people. So much so that they were so susceptible to what Charles Manson ordered them to do that they would go out and commit these horrific crimes right here in Los Angeles in the summer of 1969.
So earlier I got a little into the CIA aspect of this and the MK Ultra programming. Right now we are looking over the ranch. It was actually down here. Obviously everything has been torn down since the trials happened. A couple months ago when I was here, there was actually some boards that I found on the ground. So I don't know, I'm sure there's a lot of leftover material that people just come and take and bring home with them. But I want to get a little into the LSD, MK Ultra side of things. So right around the summer of '67 is when a man named Owsley, he actually was the manufacturer of LSD. It became illegal at this point. And he was the manufacturer, so it's interesting that all the years leading up to that, people were taking it, and it was an experimental thing. It was actually, the CIA started it to look into how they could program people's minds through suggestive programming. So it was sort of an experiment where they would put people on it, put them in these rooms. It's actually some really freaky torture stuff. I mean, they would lock them in rooms and days, in like hospital rooms, and play these like sort of films that they would have to watch over and over. And I'm sure there's still something that might be used till this day, but they realized that actually with the experiment, a lot of people, the suggestive programming didn't work on them, which I think is interesting because you can see that these days with people watching different mainstream media news programs, how some of them can get very brainwashed and then some of them don't want to follow along with it. So I think that may be very much the same thing in regards to people taking LSD. Maybe some people do become very suggestive on it, and some people sort of, they aren't capable of being brainwashed by it. But maybe, I mean, if you were being, you know, if this programming was constantly being put on you over and over, I mean, even if you were a strong person, I'm sure there would be a breaking point at some point. And what's interesting is that I actually was a cult member in the Aquarius series with David Duchovny on set of Aquarius. For this whole, it was like a series that was shot on the whole Manson family, and I was like a college girl that he was interviewing at, I think it was like a campus in LA. So that was kind of interesting, and that was like about 5 years ago. But yeah, so what's interesting about this time is like relating that back to what we were talking about earlier with the Black Lives Matter movement, is that there's always these psyops going on. The CIA is always kind of running these programs, and you can see that through was it Project Mockingbird, or Operation Mockingbird, Project Paperclip, MK Ultra. Just look into all those. This isn't just conspiracy, like these are facts. And there's always these operations going on. And as Brad Olsen got into earlier, he like, his whole family, they were talking, the Manson family were talking about a race war happening, and they were actually planning on going underground during it, and the Black Lives Matter movement started this time. Now, obviously, you know, I'm super against racism, and, you know, I'm not by any means supporting this or saying that Black Lives Matter movement is necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of people, I mean, that's great that people are standing up for their race, but it's the fact that there's always these psyops being run on us, and a country divided or a races divided can never come together to stand up to the powers that be. So they try to divide us in any way possible, whether it's race, gender, political parties. So we need to look into this. And around that time, that's when they started this. They wanted to, you can see that they were trying to start a civil war during this time. And the sort of there was sort of an uprising throughout the 60s where you could see all this happening that is very similar to the time now. I think there was a lot of similar astrological aspects going on at that time as there is now, where it's sort of an uprising and they wanted to take advantage of that. And you can see that now with the political movement. I mean, obviously, right now as I'm speaking, the election is in the process of happening. It technically took place 2 days ago, but they're still counting, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But obviously with George Floyd and with these other things that happened throughout the past year with all the riots, you can tell that there's some sort of programming going on, because it's like all these people, they're being shipped out from other towns, and all the looters and everyone, a lot of them that are being arrested during these riots, they aren't from the town that they're even in where they're doing this. And, you know, it all circles back to Antifa. What are they doing? Who runs Antifa? And what is this whole operation to separate us? And I think it all comes back to the divide and conquer strategy. They want us divided in every way possible: political party, gender, race, everything. So I think that this all really ties into what's happening right now. Even though this happened back in the 60s, we really need to take a lesson in history and think about what happened then and what is happening now. I mean, maybe they were trying to really bring out the race war at that time and turn it into a civil war in the country, and it didn't really work out the way they planned. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe the Manson family, they were part of the CIA, or Charles Manson may have been a part of the CIA and this was a program, maybe not, or maybe him being arrested actually kind of screwed up their plans with that. So who knows, but it's really something that I think we should look at and definitely relates to the present day.